Welcome to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Kessner.
My name is Claire Kaplan.
And I'm Emily Wang.
And today we're very excited to introduce you to a new author, Julie Christine, who has a book that sounds very interesting. It's called Just the Tip, Memoir of a Las Vegas Bottle Server. So, Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys.
It's our pleasure. So, just to get us started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Then we'll go into how you ended up writing this book.
Yeah, so I am a Southern girl, born and raised. My father was an immigrant from Greece, and he met my mother while she was in college, and she was a waitress at a restaurant. So I guess you can say my beginnings as a cocktail server kind of started from conception, as my mom being a waitress. And I grew up in Virginia after, born and raised, went to college in Virginia, graduated from Old Dominion University in English, and really didn't know what to do with my major afterwards. So I decided to move out west and pursue, some sort of broadcasting. But long story short, I ended up in Las Vegas as a cocktail server. I know my book, Just the Tip, Memoir of a Las Vegas Bottle Server, says bottle server, but in short, it's a cocktail server. It's just a fancier version of a cocktail server.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that little term there. So what prompted you to head out to Vegas as opposed to, say, moving further to the West?
Well, I started off in California, and I was actually, as I was trying to pursue a career in broadcasting, but I also had my insurance license to do like fire and casualty in California. But I was in a really long-term relationship where I thought I was going to get married, and it turned out to not be the case. And so I was going through a really bad breakup. And a friend of mine from San Diego had actually moved out to Las Vegas. She was in law school and decided to do cocktail server or bottle service at one of the nightclubs there. And so she was like, come visit me. And I went to visit her, and she was helping me cope with my breakup. And while I was there, I was just fascinated on how much money they actually made. And I thought to myself, well, I can actually, maybe I should contemplate working as a bottle service girl and just save up a bunch of money and then, pursue career mine maybe in the future. So as I was in Las Vegas visiting my friend, she introduced me to her manager at the time. And then he told me, hey, we're doing open casting calls in a few months, which at this time it was November of 2007. And yes, I'm a little old school, but so I decided to come back in that February to do an open casting call for the pool. And the pool there, obviously in Las Vegas, it's, a big major pool event and pool party with DJs and people getting cabanas for, $10,000 or more. And so it was a big thing. And that was my first time really getting into that whole scene and really seeing how people interact with the waitresses and stuff. And the whole time I was there, long story short, I encountered several incidences, things that happened to me, things that happened to my coworkers. And my mom actually inspired me to keep a journal the whole time I was living there, the years I was living there. And throughout the years, I just kept this journal of all my stories. And then now, years later, and I'm no longer a bottle service girl, I decided to write the book about it, my experiences.
That's really interesting. So let's get into that. Let's get into some of the stories that you relate in the book, and also perhaps some others as well. What would you like to start with?
Oh, do you want me to start with one, or do you have a question about anything specifically?
I think give us a story to start with, and we'll go from there. Could be your own story or someone else's.
Sure. So there's a bunch of chapters in the book regarding how to get hired. I mean, I not only worked at the pool, I decided after that my first summer there, because the pool is just seasonal, that I decided, I want to stay a little bit longer. So I got hired at one of the nightclubs after that. And I had a lot of really great experiences. I wouldn't take anything back. I mean, because even the good and the bad, it all defined me as who I am today. So my first job at the pool was amazing. I loved working there, and I met so many really interesting people from all over the world. And then when I got hired at one of the nightclubs that was opening up in Las Vegas, which is still probably in the top 2 nightclubs in the country, even to this day, I was hired there, and out of probably like 400 girls that applied, they only hired about 30 girls. And so I was really honored to be hired there. But, one of the stories in my book is about how I met the owner of that specific nightclub at the time, because he's no longer the owner. He actually got kicked out of that part of the, that part. He kind of favored me, and I didn't take anything at first too seriously, because I know everybody in Las Vegas flirts with each other, and everybody, has their friendships that are very flirty. But he was the boss, and I didn't take anything too seriously. He gave me a lot of compliments. And then one of the chapters of my book, which I feel like is very important to me, because he did come on to me, and I did refuse his advances. And then a week later, I was basically reprimanded and then fired from that job, which had led me to other things in other chapters in the book. But that chapter was probably one of my more serious ones, because it really just shows like you can be a good person and you can do everything that's right. And the sexual advances of some of the owners, for example, or some of the people, most people think being a bottle server, you just get all this, from clientele that comes in, but you get it from the managers and the owners too. And that's really depressing, that you can actually be blacklisted or lose your job because of, unwanted advances.
Yeah. Let me ask about that. When you are working in a business where there's the owner and they're basically the people who hire and fire, do you have, or what kind of recourse were you aware of because of that situation?
Well, when I was hired at the pool, we were just hired as cocktail servers. And so, we were employees and we had human resources and, everything at my disposal. Now, the first nightclub after I worked at the pool, which was brand new, they hired us as model cocktail servers, which is a little different because, you think, oh, you're hired as a model. Like they can use obviously we knew that they can use your image for promotional marketing and stuff, but you're also hired as a model there because they can tell you basically how to look. So if you gain weight and I was unaware of this when I first got hired there, but I just put up with it because they didn't really pick on me at that point in time, but they did pick on a bunch of other servers and they made them cry. And these are very beautiful girls. And a lot of these women are, graduated from major universities. And, they just were pick on them, their weight, how they did their makeup, their hair, like every aspect. They would tell us almost every day at this one venue how replaceable we are. And so we were also put on a 60-day probationary period. And because of that, we really didn't have any rights to any human resources or anything at the time, because we were told how replaceable we are and they can just fire us for whatever reason. And so, when the owner's like making it, at the time I didn't take it as advances towards me. I just took it as, oh, he's just giving me compliments and maybe a little flirtation and stuff, because that is the business that we're in. But it did get a little bit more and more, to the point where he at one point had invited me, this is a few months after I had started working there, had invited me into his office. And he has a private room in his office, which I was really surprised at, this nightclub is actually in the Encore part of the Wynn Casino Hotel. So the fact that an owner can have an office and a separate secret office behind a shelf inside, the nightclub I was floored, and I was really surprised. So when I was invited back there with another girl, we thought we were in trouble, to be honest with you. We thought we were probably going to get let go, but he took us back there and was just asking us questions if we like our job. And then he tried to kiss us, and he told us that he has a private shower back there. And we're thinking, oh my God, like this is really happening. So he went into the bathroom to freshen up, and we left. And then we went back on the floor to go and work, and nothing was ever said about that incident. But I didn't know what to do. Like I contacted my other managers, and they told me, don't worry about it, just let it go. And so I thought, I'm just going to let it go. Maybe he'll forget about it, because according to the management and other girls, that he does this stuff all the time, and that, he would just move on to the next girl. So I didn't want to lose my job. And so I just kind of just let it go. And then a week later, it turned out that wasn't the case. He definitely remembered.
Yes. And you obviously heard stories from other women, your coworkers. Did you hear similar stories, or were there some that were more even worse?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely heard similar stories. And, what got me, though, the most was a lot of girls, I felt like some were willing to go through it because they didn't care. They knew if they, hung out with the management or hung out with the owners in that kind of way, or, got with them after their advances, then they would be advanced in a better table section where they would make even more money. So a lot of girls didn't have a problem with it and they didn't care. And I felt like, that's their personal choice and that's for them, to live with. But other girls, like, they felt like they couldn't say no. They felt powerless. And I wasn't raised that way. So I did hear stories, but I knew that, well, maybe he's just always very nice to me, but he's never actually hit on me. So I just thought you're just a good cocktail server and he was just being friendly. But I was never picked out until that specific incident. And so, I was kind of like, when everything occurred, I said no. I ran out of the room and, got reprimanded after that. But that's just, I would never I try to say I would never put myself in situations, but when it's at work, it's a little different because you would never expect something like that to happen at the office of your job while you're on duty.
Right. I think that's a common experience where you expect to be treated like a professional. And what you discover, especially in certain industries, such as the one you're in, the rules are not as clear. What are your thoughts about this business as a whole? You refused to participate and were punished for it. What are your thoughts on the climate in this particular business? And what do you think should change?
In this particular business, the climate is very sexual based. It is very looks based and flirtatious based. So I already knew what I was getting myself into, and I'm a strong person. And so I knew, but I thought it would be coming more from clientele. And I knew, especially when people are drinking or, it's Vegas, sometimes they do drugs and stuff too. And they get a little too touchy-feely. It does happen. I will call security over, of course, or handle the situation myself and say, don't touch me, don't do this. I try to keep it professional. But I never say it in a way to show anger. I always do it. And other cocktail servers or even bartenders, they'll understand and stuff. Like sometimes you just have to flirt your way out of a situation without ruining your tip. Because at the end of the day, too, this is my job and I don't want someone to complain to my bosses because I don't want to be retaliated against because I did say no to the clientele and made them embarrassed of themselves. And I don't want it to affect my tip at the end of the day. You just have to casually say, no, that's unacceptable. And I'm just really surprised, to be honest with you, in today's day and age. Like, I still have friends who are bottle servers, and it still goes on with owners, management, and even some clientele. And you would think that, especially in this industry, there would be a line that should not be crossed, especially with the Me Too movement, and that happened a couple of years ago. But apparently, it still happens, and I'm actually really surprised about that. How people can still let this stuff go. I mean, when that incident happened with me, the specific incident with the owner. After I was fired a week later, I actually tried to talk to an attorney and say, hey, what are my rights here? Because I know I was on probation, but at the same time, this is insane. And I actually talked to had three different consultations in Las Vegas, and they were all telling me, you can't fight a casino. Just drop it, because if you were to pursue something like this, they have so much money that the owners or management or the owners would back the managers, that they will keep you in court for years and you'll be blacklisted and never work in Vegas. And so I didn't take that route because, I didn't want this to drag on. Unfortunately, I didn't want anything to drag on. I did say no, so I just thought maybe I can just move on to another venue and use this firing and this incident and just go somewhere else.
And did you go somewhere else? Did you find another job?
Yes, I did. So after I was fired, I took a month or two off, just because I was just trying to think what I was actually going backtracking and thinking, what did I do? Did I say something or do something to make this man think, that I was interested in him? I mean, I was always just nice, but I always wonder, where does that line come from? But then I realized, it wasn't my fault. If someone's going to be a predator, they're going to be a predator. It doesn't matter if you are not show no interest or you're just friendly, showing friendly banter. It doesn't matter. A predator's always going to be a predator. So after this happened, I actually had met another manager from another nightclub, and they hired me there at that venue at the next nightclub I worked at. And I ended up being there for 3 years. And because of that, I actually had moved to New York City after my experiences in Las Vegas, and worked with the same company. The company was, I'll say them, they're called Tao Group. And it turned out to be one of the best experiences of my life. Like the management there was amazing. I met some other girls who are also bottle servers, and we're still friends to this day. So if that experience had never happened to me where I got fired and moved on to another venue, I would have never had even more great experiences and met friendships that I still have today.
That's great to hear. So we know that the climate isn't universal, that it's under certain kinds of management in certain companies. Are you aware of any efforts on the part of folks who are doing this kind of work, whether it's unionizing or fighting for the rights and your safety when you're out on the floor? Is there anything happening in that way?
Oh, yeah. From my understanding, well, after the one job, I got fired and stuff. I guess a couple other girls had ended up losing their jobs too throughout the next year after that. And with the same thing, being sexually harassed, saying no. And I know another story, one girl actually, she said no to a certain manager. And I guess he was super offended. So he started commenting on her weight. And then after, they basically forced her to quit. So that way, because if they fired her, they would have to pay her unemployment. So they forced her to quit. And she actually did get an attorney. And when she did that, I guess the Encore Hotel, which is part of the Wynn, became union. And so now they're union. Now a lot of the nightclubs and even the really big pool parties, or any kind of Vegas cocktail serving or bartending job, most of them have become unionized now. When I was there, it was from 2008 until 2013, 14, before I moved to New York. It was rare to have union would be the cocktail servers on the floor of the casinos, the MGM, Wynn, Encore, Cosmopolitan, the ones who worked the actual casino floors. But none of the nightclubs were ever union until recently. And now because of that, we do have more rights. And I feel like that's such a positive aspect. I mean, girls still get harassed, which I'm really surprised, because if you're union, then you have union reps now. But yeah, everybody's union now. So good for them.
Right. Well, and of course, that helps if you don't have the kind of money to hire a lawyer. It's very nice to have a large organization behind you.
Even if you did have money, I mean, because we did make an astronomical amount of money in tips, I'm not going to lie. So even if you did have money, I mean, I had a lot of money saved up and that I had earned since then. Still, no attorney would take my case, because then they themselves don't want to fight against a casino. Because even though at the time when I was there, we weren't union, the club itself was in the hotel. And so they had they were using all the same representatives and attorneys for them. And they just were backed by so much money that, they would make me go bankrupt and then also blacklist me. And I just didn't want that vibe on my shoulders. I didn't want that to drag on. And, there were so many other, as I stayed in Vegas those years and worked for the other venue, other stories started coming out and other lawsuits did start coming out. But of course, the cocktail servers at that time were called Jane Does because they didn't want their names to be out in public, to be blacklisted. But and there are 2 chapters in my book about that as well. Because when I first got there, one of the jobs I interviewed at, that club was known to have very high sexual harassment. And so I didn't get hired there, and I took it as a blessing in disguise. But they ended up getting sued to the point where now they have been banned from Las Vegas. And they were known as the Light Group, and their owners have pretty much been banned too. I don't know. I think they actually opened up clubs now in Miami, to be honest with you, and changed their name. They're no longer Light Group, but they still do their thing, just not in Vegas anymore.
Very interesting. So are there other stories that maybe didn't make it into your book that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, there's one in specific and I'm going to do a personal essay on that on the side, just because it not only was about me, but it also included a really dear friend of mine. And I didn't want her to have any PTSD reminding her that this happened to her while I was there, in a book for everybody to read, although I did change names to protect people's privacy. But this was just, I'm really close friends with her. And I felt like it was, as a friend, it wasn't right for me to put her story / our story in the book. But as a personal essay, I could do that because that's separate. So what happened was, with me and her, we went out one night and we were with a bunch of other coworkers, and we just, we're having a good time. And I just remember, the next thing I remember was kind of waking up in a hotel room, and she's next to me, and she's, with one of our coworkers, a male. And I didn't know what to think of it. And I feel like I'm kind of drunk, and I really didn't drink that much. And so I didn't really realize what was going on. And then finally I woke up and they were gone, and then I left. Come to find out, we were date rape drugged. And I don't think I was raped. I actually got checked and stuff, just to be honest. But she came to me a couple of days later and told me that she was raped. She was in and out of it. And I felt so horrible as a friend, because I did wake up and I didn't know what was going on. And I couldn't defend her, and I couldn't stick up for her, because not only am I concerned about myself, and being put in situations where I know I can say no, but I don't want a friend of mine to be right next to me and maybe feel powerless. And the fact that this was one of our coworkers, he was a VIP host, his girlfriend was also a cocktail server with us. So it was a really very sad story. And we all had to go to work with each other 2 days later. And so when she told me this, I felt so bad, and I didn't know what to do. And so I actually ended up telling my manager that I kind of fibbed a little bit. I said I was in the room. I didn't say her. And that I feel like something happened to me. And then, because I wanted to try to protect her as much as I could and do something for her, but it was a lot of sadness and stuff for my friend during that period. And the guy was ultimately fired, and then his girlfriend actually found out and stuff, and she, broke up with him, and she was just mortified too, which really has nothing to do with her. But, that's the first time I've ever been, I think the drug is called G, that's what they call it, or GHP.
GHB, yeah.
Yes. And I guess it's a liquid form. I never even knew anything about it, to be honest with you, even though I was in the nightclub industry, until, we all went out as coworkers. I would never think someone would put that in our own drinks. We're at a table drinking with friends. And then, next thing I remember is just kind of waking up. Don't remember ever walking to this hotel room, really. And then my friend, being assaulted and raped, right next to me. And so it felt like that brought back a lot of PTSD for me. And I didn't want to put that in the book. I did ask her, and she said, well, she was kind of hesitant. And I said, what, I'm not going to put that in the book, because I don't want that bringing up any PTSD for you. So I'm not going to put that in the book, But I do feel like it's an important story, so that people, you can be victimized in multiple ways. Just because you're not personally raped, you can be involved in something that does happen, and how can you help without feeling so helpless,
Mm-hmm. Yes. And let's talk about that a little bit. When you were there, of course, you were still under the influence of the drug, so it's hard to know how you feel. But thinking about that over time and to today, how did that feel as someone who was friends with this woman, and there you were, you couldn't do anything because you couldn't really act? What are the long-term consequences for you in terms of that, just for you?
Yeah, so it really bothered me. I take things to heart right away, and I try to resolve issues as soon as I can, so that way it doesn't give me PTSD later on in life. And I know I'm probably not, I'm probably different than a lot of women. A lot of women probably want to forget about it. My friend, she didn't know what to do, and she kind of just wanted to forget about it. So we handled that situation completely opposite of each other, because I told her she needs to say something, and she didn't want to. And I respect her decision. But at the same time, me wanting to be protective for my friend, I wanted to tell my managers, hey, this is what happened. I don't remember much, but kind of just said it was just me there. Yeah, but it's really tough to feel helpless and stuff. And I felt like once everything was done and he was fired, I kind of didn't think about that anymore. And it kind of I forgot about it, to be honest with you. I wrote everything, of course, that happened into my journal that my mom told me to write. And then now, years later, when I'm writing the book and I'm reading through my journal and all these stories, even the really funny ones, but of course, the more serious ones, it actually took me a year to write my memoir. And, it's short and sweet, but it did take me a little while, because as I'm reading my journal and remembering these stories, it kind of brought me back to that time, how I felt. And I felt like, oh my God, I had the visions again. And to be honest with you, I actually started getting more memory back of that night that happened. I do remember now, kind of walking through the casino at certain points. But it's weird how years later, your brain can remove things, and all of a sudden it can come back and kind of haunt you later on when you thought you forgot about it.
That is interesting. And I think a lot of people are not entirely aware that memory is a funny thing, and stuff can come back to you at the most unexpected moments.
Yeah. Like I would have never, I don't think I would really, I mean, I don't know what the future holds, me remembering it, or maybe if something, God forbid, something bad would have happened to me, or maybe someone else later on, it would probably come back to me. But I really hadn't read my journal up until the time I was decided to finally write this book. Because another thing, working in Las Vegas when I was there, we had to sign a lot of non-disclosure agreements because a lot of celebrities used to come in all the time and clientele that would spend a lot of money. And so this was before social media and before everybody could film you on their phones 24/7. So the term "what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas" was the real thing. And plus, these non-disclosure agreements that we had to sign working at the clubs, nightclubs, some lasted like 5 years. So I had to wait for all this to expire. And then I was like, my mom really pushed me to write this book. And so I was just going through my journal. And then, I saw these stories and I'm like, oh man, I remember that. And it really started hitting me. And then also talking about it with my friend because I wanted to get her permission if I can write it. And then I felt guilty bringing it back up to her.
I know that Emily probably has questions for you. One quickie though is, so the stories you did share, were people very open and willing to say, yeah, sure, go ahead and share our stories?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of, unfortunately, I had 2 friends that did pass away, and legally I am allowed to write about them because I don't have to get their permission. I know it's shitty to say. I'm sorry, excuse my language. But when it comes to my other friends, I did ask them and I did use aliases. So nobody's name in there except for, some of the positive stories and stuff. But most people's names have been changed and they do know that some of their stories are in there, the good and the bad. And I did get most of people's permission, even though I did change their names. So yeah, they're in there. And a lot of them are married now with kids. So of course I would never want to humiliate them, but I did want to ask as a friend and stuff.
Yeah. I guess along that line of thinking, how did you and your other sort of cocktail servers protect each other in these kinds of circumstances? I'm sure you must have had some sense of community and, shared responsibilities. So how did you keep each other safe?
Yeah. So unfortunately, you hear these stories all the time, especially when you are in the industry. We call it the industry. And so everybody knows it happens. It's kind of the elephant in the room, whether or not it's happened to you or a friend. That's something that you can discuss with your friends. But a lot of the girls who do work there, I kind of divide us up into 2 different categories. And nothing against them personally. It's just some girls don't know how to protect themselves. And other girls don't care to protect themselves. They actually see it as a way to promote themselves or get ahead of the game. And if that's how they feel, I feel like more power to those women. If they want to deal with that, then that's their choice and, no judgment whatsoever. But to the women that feel powerless, yes, I have had friends who have felt like they didn't know what to do in the situation. And so I would give them my example or other girls would give them their examples. And if they felt like uncomfortable, like if it was mainly with clientele, but if it was with a manager or owner, we would never talk about this at work. But the support system you have there in Las Vegas is just, I don't know how else to explain it, just unreal. The group of women, not only everybody kind of judges us based off, our beauty and stuff. And a lot of women and men automatically think we're bimbos or something because of the type of work that we do. But, it's a lot of really strong women and you have to have a lot of resilience to do this type of job and develop some sort of tough skin, especially when it comes to the clientele. So you can be like the teamwork, not only at work, but afterwards, being friends. Like we all do trips together. We just have a huge support system. And if something happened to one of the girls, it does get around. Like as Vegas, a lot of people, millions of people travel there every summer, every weekend. You do know who works where, and rumors do. I don't want to say gossip, but a lot of this stuff does come out in the open, and people do find out things. And so it's just, you definitely have a huge, strong woman, femme fatale kind of support system there for sure.
Any other questions, Emily?
Did I answer that okay? Or you can ask me in more depth if you need to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I do think that of course we all have these sorts of ways of sharing information regardless of what industry you're in. And so it's fantastic that you and your friends all kind of get together and share information. I think that that's fantastic.
Yeah, even if it's, oh, I know about this man, or I know about this coworker, or I heard about this client, because there's only so many clients that spend that amount of money, or this owner or manager, we tell the girls like, oh, I heard about them, so stay away or watch yourself, or, be prepared. And even if it's true or not, I don't want to say we gossip about it, but we just more like protect each other. Like, hey, this is some stuff that happened with this guy, or this is what's heard. So just protect yourself and don't, be in a vicinity with him for too long. It's stuff like that. Now, when it comes to working, though, and clientele, because the management would never really bother you or flirt with you at work, and neither would the owners. I mean, while you're on your shift, while everything's happening, because you're just very busy with your tables and doing that. So when it comes to the clientele, a lot of us would have buddy systems, whoever works next to us. So if someone's feeling harassed, we also have our busboys, and a lot of our busboys would totally have our back, and we have security there. So when it came to clientele, obviously a lot of them would try to put their hands on you or flirt with you, especially as they got drunk. But, you would have your team members, your busser, another cocktail server come in and try to alleviate the situation. And if it gets too bad, you have security. So you do have ways to protect yourself while working. I think it's just more like at the end of your shift or the beginning of your shift, or maybe outside of your shift when you go out, and it comes to management and owners, that you just need to sometimes be careful about, because that's really difficult to protect yourself, and you need to know what your rights are. And it is nice to hear from other women who have heard stories or have had stories happen to them on how to protect yourself if you're put in that situation.
That's great. And, that brings us to thinking about what can people who work in this particular business or similar sorts of careers, where you're kind of at the mercy, if not of management, then certainly of your clientele. What are some ways that you think that these communities can support one another?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a slippery slope, because my book is called Just the Tip. It's a lot of things, it's what we do just to make the extra tip. I mean, it's a tipping industry, so you do have to flirt a lot, but it's just a specific line that you should know that should never be crossed. So I don't know how else I just think for people who are in the industry, they already know, whether it's a bartender, a cocktail server, even a waitress at a restaurant. I think it's a whole different type of lifestyle. And most people who work in that business automatically have a personality to them that they're very resilient. They're able to handle not only sexual advances, but let's say if a customer gets very aggressive because they don't like the way their food was cooked, or, don't like their drink or something, you just have to handle it a certain way. And so I think that only certain people can handle those situations. It just takes a special kind of person, and only the people who are in the industry kind of know what I'm talking about or have been in the industry, because you have to be stern, but also friendly and not overly aggressive yourself to protect yourself, because you don't want to. Your whole job is to make tips.
Which raises a question. If the industry went to a salary format as opposed to tip format, in Europe, they don't have tips. People get a wage. How do you think things would change if that were to happen?
Well, a lot of people wouldn't work there, that's for sure, because especially in Las Vegas, because I was averaging about $2,000 a day, working 4 days a week. So I don't know any kind of salary, unless you're a doctor, that would provide that amount of money.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. That's why it's, when casting calls happen and when auditions, they call it auditions now, to become one of those cocktail servers or even bartenders, hundreds of girls apply for these jobs. And like I said, most of them do know what you're getting into, or what's possible, what could happen, but they never think it's going to happen to them, So, but yeah, you make as much money as a surgeon does. So in Las Vegas, I don't see that happening, but maybe the rest of the country, who knows?
Okay. Well, Emily, do you have any last thoughts?
I just want to say thank you for sharing your sort of experiences and your expertise with us today. I don't think I have any other questions.
And I don't want to deter anybody from not pursuing this as a career or maybe a summer job, because to be honest with you, the good does outweigh the bad. I mean, I was able to, for example, save so much money that I was able to follow one of my passions and, teach English and go to Africa for 2 months and teach English to a bunch of children out there as a second language. So the opportunities, I'm not saying like take the good with the bad, but because you never want the bad, but at the same time, like it was one of the best, those were some of the best jobs and the best times I've had in my life. And I met some of the most amazing women with shared experiences. So I don't deter anybody who ever wants to audition or do this as a career path.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's really important. And obviously, it's important work. So there's always a need. And the fact that you were able to
just be strong and, be true to yourself. And that's all you can really do at any path in life.
Well, thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your story with us. And folks, if you're interested in reading her book, where can they find it?
My book is sold on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's also on my publisher site, bookbaby.com. I'm also actually getting ready to do a book signing, and so a couple book signings in Las Vegas. So they can also go to my author website, authorjuliachristine.com, and find out all my information on there as well.
Thank you so much. It absolutely is our pleasure. Take care.
Thank you for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. We look forward to welcoming all of our survivors, supporters for another episode in the coming week. Please continue to take good care of yourself. Together, we will shatter the silence and end the violence.